Yeah, I mean, that last launch of Starliner, it creatively disassembled. Was it 3 minutes after launch?
Yeah, less than that. They still have that amount of fuel payload weight factor that's causing such a problem,
Yeah,
right? They're burning that much fuel all the time that they're only going up 2.5 minutes
which
when
is
the first stage kicks out. And Musk was using 32 engines. And it sat for, there was so much weight on there. And that's without a payload.
oh, no payload, no. We're told
That's without a payload. And it sat for 7 seconds on the launch pad before it even moved because it needed to burn the fuel down to get the thrust. And he's claiming those engines are supposed to max out at 500,000 pounds each. How do you get the 7.8 million pounds of thrust is what his total lift capability is when he's doing that. So that's actually less than that he was putting up there on those engines. Otherwise, he'd have 15 million pounds of thrust.
well, if he's got 32 engines and they produce 500,000 pounds of thrust each,
16 million pounds of thrust he should have produced.
which is twice what the Saturn V rocket was alleged to have produced. And that could only launch 120 tons. And we're told this can launch 150 tons. Well, it's not much of an improvement, really, is it? 150 over 120? Not a great deal.
I think the fuel always causes a discrepancy there.
Yeah, they're certainly carrying a lot of fuel. Well, they have to carry a lot of fuel for those engines.
Yeah.
But you've got to get it into space, and it disassembled before it reached space.
Well, you saw some of his engines were actually burning themselves up, and he even did videos on that showing the difference when the engine itself starts to disassemble. If it's burning copper or burning steel or whatever, you can see the different colors coming out.
It's a bit sad, really. They're still claiming they're going to land on the moon December next year. Well, they've got to get the thing off the ground first.
Yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it? They have to get it off the ground.
Well, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
And that's still unmanned.
Well, thank goodness for that. Otherwise, we'd have deaths in space again, which we haven't had for a while because nobody's tried it.
The unusual thing is when you come down to the different companies that are working with the space programs, the different ones that are involved there with Bezos and stuff like that. Branson's, he's pretty much out of business, is he not?
Yeah, he is. He's closed his place over in the UK.
He wasn't even trying to get to low Earth orbit. He was only trying to put a little tourist event up there at 100,000 feet. Now, how could you possibly fail at that when we claim to have the technology, to simply go into low Earth orbit at 125 miles? And he couldn't even manage 100,000 feet as a little tourist venture with a capsule that goes up there and shoots up. That's where I find the discrepancy all the time. You think if somebody else had the technology that, well, he's developing that, why would you spend 20 years working on it and not succeed when you could pick the phone up and say, can I buy some of that technology from you so I can do this next week?
Well, if the technology doesn't exist for what you want it for, you can't buy it because it doesn't exist. It's a circular argument, this whole space thing. Yeah, sure, you can get rockets into low Earth orbit. And Musk has said that getting into low Earth orbit is actually quite difficult.
His quote was, getting to space is easy. Getting into low Earth orbit is 100 times more difficult just to achieve a stable orbit.
Because it's got to accelerate to 17,500 miles an hour to get into low Earth orbit and stay there. Unmanned satellites can get there. We see that all the time. And Musk is doing it with his Starlink satellite system.
Yeah, his Starlink pretty much disappeared, didn't it? When he claimed that CME, he lost 80% of them in one CME, right?
God.
I mean, that pretty much tells you what's going on, right?
Space is a dangerous place for humans to be. Dangerous for human-created artifacts to put into space because we don't protect them. Surely they know enough by now to know what CMEs can do, what galactic cosmic rays can do.
And that's being protected by the Van Allen belts when you're in low Earth orbit. If you went beyond the Van Allen belts and those CMEs hit, those vehicles are toast.
Yeah, exactly.
And staying on the topic of BS, anybody can Google Voyager 2. Apparently, it's still sending back signals. And not only that, it took a photograph 3 billion miles away from the Earth and sent the photograph back. And what you see in the photograph, anybody can Google it, they have a little point and they say, this is the Earth from 3 billion miles away, and here's the Milky Way. Well, the Milky Way is 100,000 light years across. We're on somewhat the outer arms of the Milky Way, but we're still well within it. In the timeline that Voyager 2 has been traveling to travel 3 billion miles out, I think it's supposed to be traveling at 75,000 miles an hour or something like that now. The fact that it didn't have any power on board to escape the sun's gravity, never mind the Earth's gravity, but it has to escape the sun's gravity to get out of the solar system. And then if they're claiming that it has escaped the Milky Way, it has to escape from the gravity from the Milky Way. And the bullshit meter, you just can't build one that big to do that. But this beautiful picture that is so-called sent back is just unbelievable. And people are willing to believe that. I mean, this thing did nothing but send a beacon back the same as Sputnik did. Now they have articles out there that claim that it encountered an alien spacecraft. It described it and sent the information back on it, and then a picture of the Earth from 3 billion miles away. It never had that technology to start with.
Certainly not on Voyager. I mean, that was launched, what, late 70s?
75.
75, so it's been out there a while.
76, Voyager 1 and 2 in that range.
Yeah.
And of course, this is the one that contained the gold platter with the 75 different languages on, saying greetings and stuff like that, and all of the other stuff. The movie Starman refers to that. Who's in that? Jeff Bridges and Karen Allen starring in the movie. And they actually come back with the disc. They actually show the gold platter disc in the thing saying greetings.
Perhaps ET has intercepted the spacecraft and ramped up its battery so it could work again, and said, look, it's me. Took a picture of itself and sent it back to Earth. Said, well, that's what you want to look.
They already did that in Star Trek. Voyager.
Star Trek was pretty good. Gene Roddenberry knew what he was talking about.
He already thought all of these things through, because people see it in a movie. They want it to be in real life. They're crossing fantasy, using their imagination, and just melting it into real life. And that's like the British Interplanetary Society, imagination to reality. All you have to do is talk about it, and it becomes reality. And that's what NASA is really good at.
They're very good at it. Yeah, they've been doing it for years. And we believed it because we want to believe it. Doesn't mean to say it's true. We just want to believe it.
Of course we do. We want to advance as a species. We don't recognize any limitations because our imagination can take us beyond our limitations, our physical limitations.
But going from imagination to reality is quite a jump for humans, and we haven't made it all the way. We're still imagining things. It's quite sad, really, in some cases. I mean, the fact that people believe it. Most times when I speak to people who have basic interest in the whole subject of space, I always ask them, I say, do you believe man has landed on the moon? Increasingly now, they're doubting it. I mean, they're people who wouldn't necessarily have much information about it. But they say, well, if it was so easy to do it 50 years ago, what's so hard now? I mean, that's the gist of what they say. So NASA have got a real credibility problem here, a real credibility of what they can actually do, because they're not showing that they can do very much. I mean, last time they launched a rocket, it almost destroyed their launch pad. So that gives an excuse to delay things a little bit. Musk destroyed his launch pad, so he's obviously got the money to build it back up again. So he launches another rocket. I haven't seen the launch pad of that one yet.
Robert and I jumped on Google Earth and we were actually measuring the launch pads. And of course, there's no tower at Cape Kennedy. The recent photographs are sitting there. There's nothing there to launch off of at the particular times. That crawler that takes the rockets out, the tracks are still sitting there, right? That's 150 feet across that machine. Just the crawler alone going out there. The concrete sluice to control the exhaust on launch. You got a huge water tower up on the side of it coming in right at the ocean's edge coming into it. It's about 3,000 feet out from there coming into it. The launch pads were 3,000 feet across as well. And these sloughs are over 1,000 feet long of concrete. Unbelievable. And then we went to Musk's site, where the car was sitting was only about 400 feet from the launch pad. And the stuff that was going out in the ocean that was breaking off of there, we just kind of measured it out. It's about 3/4 of a mile it was kicking stuff out into the ocean.
That's quite a long way to launch something that distance, because they're quite big lumps of concrete. It takes a lot of power.
There's the space center there, but the size of these are just unreal. Most of the viewing on here, I think the people that are viewing are sitting back here because they're looking across the water.
That's right. Yeah, they are.
But when you come into here, that's the main building. These are the crawler towers coming out of here. That's the water tower right there, and the line running into it, going across. And if we just go from right there across to there, that's 3,100 feet, almost 3,200 feet across there.
That's about, what, 3/4 of a mile?
3/4 of a mile. That's a kilometer across there.
That's quite big.
Here's the width of this chute coming across there. That's 300 feet across at the mouth of that. And then you're coming down, and the sluice from one end to the other is 700 feet across that way. You see these runoffs here from these concrete diverted on a thing? That one's 520 feet right there. And these ones coming in here, if you go from that end to that end on the build for it to divert it, that's 1,500 feet. That's not messing around.
Yeah, that's quite big, that.
To get down to the ground view on that. And you see that there's no launch pad there. Like, there's no tower. These are the communication towers. There's the water tower that's way the hell out there. That's quite a ways off, right? Like, that's 1,500 feet from the thing. And then you see the tracks that are sitting there down.
Yeah.
Robert has a video where they're putting big steel sheets down in front, or I don't know, they're wooden sheets. They look like steel sheets in front of the crawler so that it doesn't sink into the ground. And then they're picking them up and moving them to the front and back so you wouldn't see the tracks. So I guess they've got it packed down well enough now that they can put the crawler out on it.
Oh, talking of tower, when the crawler comes out with a rocket on it, it has the tower on it as well, which keeps the rocket upright, which might account for why there isn't a tower there.
Yeah, but there's two towers. One that it comes out on the support on it that hooks into the other main tower, because the other main tower has the elevator on it, and the other tower that's put into place has all of it to fuel it up. And now I'll just skip out of here, and we'll just go over and we'll take a look at Musk's site. It's easy to spot because it's right at the border here. And this is right in the bottom corner of Texas. And you can just come right down and you will be able to find it. There it is.
A lot of buildings around it.
Okay, here's the launch pad here. That's the main tower that's sitting there. There's the launch pad right there. That car that was hit was right over here in that video, because there's the tanks sitting right there.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, okay, got it.
This is just the launch area. The other building over there, which is 3 or 4 or 5 miles away, is the control center for it. But you can come right down and see the buildings there and the tower that he's building. You can see where they're constructing it. That was the upper stage of it on there. I think that's the lower stage that's being put together. Big column on it there. Now you can see the tower that's in place for it, all right? Like Houston should have the same tower, should be up there on the thing. But you see the type of facilities that he's operating under here, right? But when you come back out on the thing and we come out, that's the launch pad there. And
right.
The stuff was going out to about there in the water, in around that area in the water. It's about equal distance from the thing out onto the water like that. If you measure that in feet from there, and you just go out about there, there's you're over 3,000 feet out.
That's quite a long way to launch a lump of concrete.
Yeah, and like I said, you come down, that thing was right there. There's 400 feet just to the corner of that building, and that's where that car was sitting. Yeah. That's pretty damn close. And of course, when you come back and you look and you see that he didn't have anything designed into here like what NASA has. There's no water on this platform, nothing for the exhaust to run off with. Right? You think if it was going to look like that it would have underground tunnels out like every other one to shoot the exhaust out this way and that way, right?
Could do, yeah.
It's just not even there. I mean, he's using a different fuel that might have something to do with it, but it's quite a different design. But over here, when you come in, like it even pulls up on the display, this is his command center, everything else running that. That's a fair piece off from there to there. Like if you just go from the center here down to there, right? It's over 2 miles away. So to be quite safe there, all of this equipment, I guess they expect it to be damaged.
But you know what's interesting, going back to that launch pad at NASA, 3.5 miles from Kennedy Space Center to that main launch pad, that's crazy. And this guy here only has 400 feet.
Well, 2 miles from his control center, but they were leaving vehicles there 400 feet away from the launch pad.
Yes.
Well, they got hit.
32 engines running, no sluice, no water, no anything to control that exhaust.
No, but I don't understand. Everybody else uses water. Now, why didn't he? That's an expensive lesson, isn't it?
You think he would have picked the phone up and said, "Hey, NASA, how did you do it to stop the damn thing from blowing up?" You know, he's got his rapid disassembly button built in there all the time. I mean, it's either going to blow up right on the launch pad or it's going to go up and blow up. He wants really tiny parts when it blows up, too. He doesn't want to have to clean them up.
Or I wonder how many fish get destroyed when all that stuff hits the water.
I think the fish are wise enough to get out of the area. All that vibration, they'll be out of there.
You think the tree huggers would get out there and tell him to clean it up? Those millions of little pieces on the ocean floor that he'd have to go out and screen them all and get them all out of there again, right? Of course, they don't pay for environmental damage because it's all government sponsored. And he gets a pretty good chunk of money from the U.S. government to put these projects on.
Yeah, he does. How he can keep going, because he's paid by the U.S. government. Contract.
And that's because he can get up and say, we're headed for Mars, right? So let's go ahead and do it.
Well, they've got to get to the moon first before they get...
he's got to get off the ground first now.
Well, that's true.
he's back to that part.
Yeah, it must be expensive business building all these rockets that disassemble themselves rather rapidly.
Well, he makes a profit at it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I don't suppose he cares too much about it. I haven't seen Jeff Bezos come along and say, well, those rockets kept blowing up. Mine are much better, so use mine. He hasn't done that.
Well, they have a lawsuit over that for the government funding between Bezos and Musk. Anybody can Google that. You can see that because one of them got awarded a particular part of a contract and another one got awarded a particular part of the contract. And of course, both of them want to have the whole ball of wax, right? They want all the funding. And the only ones making money, really good money off of that right now are the lawyers.
Always the case.
I was going through the original photographs here of the way the rover is being mounted in here. This one is part of the frame being set up here without the base plate on the rover itself. The seats are in place, but the base plate's not on there. That's just showing how it's set up. Then here it is here, now with the base plate on it. And the reason why the fenders extended back at the front on them was to fold up to be able to fit in there. So the rear fenders folded up from the back side and the front fenders folded up. They slid up on the front side. That's so it would all fit in the amount that they had there to work with. These little hooks down here, these pins out here, we're going to see them in the next photograph. I don't think this machine actually folds up because the trainers didn't actually fold up. That's the equipment rack at the back that is shooting there. They're pushing it up on a mount here on that particular one. Here are the cables. See these little tiny cables that come down and pin in there? This is the heaviest piece of equipment that they have. And all they needed was these little aircraft cables to hold it in place while it's being mounted in there. Any of the other straps that you see Wouldn't need to be any bigger than this because this is the heaviest piece of equipment being held in place.
And of course, all the equipment that was installed onto the rover, like the cameras and the antenna and all the stuff at the back, all the tools, that all had to be taken from the lander and installed accurately onto the rover and attached to the rover securely.
There's another thing here with these batteries. They would have to be completely sealed because first it's flipped upside down. Battery's going to be turned upside down, and then they're mounted vertically there. These arms right here, as the cable comes down, it pulls it away from the vehicle and lowers it down onto the ground. These two right here.
But when it's lowered onto the ground, there's no equipment on the rover at all. There's no steering mechanism.
Oh, the seats are there. They fold down. That was that first one that I showed there. The seats are in there before the bottom plates are on. They fold right down.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, got that.
There's the arms coming down that it lowered down on. This is Apollo 15 where it got crushed. These arms are broken. The two are on the ground here. And you can see right here, the cables have snapped here and here from the cable ends. There's the two. They snap from there to there, broken. And these other two parts of that arm that lower it down. When they actually dropped this vehicle in their simulated landing, it probably dropped 10 or 12 feet. And it was a hard enough drop to break these cables. So that rover fell off the machine on their simulated landing. Literally fell off the machine. And there's the evidence of it right there, showing that it snapped completely off, is laying on the ground. And that's why they had to do a stand-up EVA in Apollo 15, because they couldn't get out because the equipment had literally fallen off the side of the machine. They had the stand-up EVA, went for 6 hours sleep or whatever, got something to eat. The first thing they should have done is got out, and of course they're going to mount the flag and salute it, but then they're going to set up the experimental equipment. That's what should have happened, because in case their trip was cut short, that would at least be in place. That would be a priority, to have stuff that's going to be left on the lunar surface to run those experiments. But that's not what happened. They went out on EVA 1 and did a tour. Then they came back, went and had another 6 hours sleep. Then they got up and got on the rover for a second time and went on the second EVA. And when they came back from the second EVA, that's when they set up the experimental equipment. But you don't see them setting it up. It just happens to be there when they get back. And that's when they do the flag salute. And there's another 3 shots of all of the equipment that's down there. These little pieces here, I've shown these before. Those 2 little pieces are the joint. You can see it in the shadow from the secondary strut coming in. And they've shot that 4, 5, 6 times there to shoot that. This leg here is 32 inches down. Right there, it's 32 inches down from the secondary strut, and that is the full compression as it lands. These legs should have compressed by at least 10 inches just from the weight of the vehicle on the lunar surface. They were designed to compress 10 inches. And of course, you'd see the foil rolled up 10 inches. That didn't happen. Those pieces I was showing you on the ground are the ball swivels that go in there and attach the main strut to the secondary strut right there. Those were broken off. When you come over to this side, this leg is longer than all the rest. That's 32 inches. This is probably 45 inches because they didn't move it. They just had to put a new leg on it while they were off on their EVAs. They're coming back, taking this shot. All of this activity is all the way around with all this stuff thrown underneath here. But they were away on EVA for EVA 1 and 2, and then when they get back, the experimental equipment is already in sight. You can see it already set up for them. Yeah. But they haven't been anywhere near this machine. You can even see there's a bit of dust on the leg here. They didn't get the foil color just quite right here. And obviously they were into here and had to rewrap it all because this was all broken up. But they left the old ball swivels on the ground. They obviously took away the main leg and stuff like that. But when you come over to this one, this leg is damaged as well. On this leg right here, that foot pad has been disconnected from the leg. It's not sitting in the center. It's sitting over there. I'll find a better picture. And if you look closely, you can see it kicked over. It's disconnected, and it's sitting right over at the edge of the pad because that part was damaged as well. That's what people need to see. All these straps here, these little straps here, the ones that they had to pull the equipment, like these ones like that, were to pull the equipment out or a tray out or whatever, or to help lower it. That's what all those are about. You shouldn't see any of this because they were away on 2 EVAs.
What's that piece of equipment that is on the footpad?
Well, in practice, they had extra backpacks with them. And of course, the only thing they'd need in there was a CO2 scrubber. So just 2 canisters. And here's one that's fully closed up here. And each astronaut in practice, and that's in the Finney file, had extra backpacks out there. And of course, the ones that they practiced with are not 140 pounds. Because there's no way they'd be able to run around and practice with over 180 pounds of weight on their system.
They'd be leaning forward if they had.
They would be leaning forward. If they bent down, they're not going to get back up. Here's the other piece of equipment that is damaged. And you'll see this in Apollo 15, 16, and 17. It's always open. This is the core for the RTG, the nuclear core. There's the outer part of it sitting right there. Part of that framing that holds it in. And it's just sitting there. And in 16 and 17, you just see it tilted down. You don't see them lowering it with all this equipment. You only see it in Apollo 12. These styrofoam pieces that are molded are designed to go up over top, up here, over top of these upper legs. They go over there, and then it's covered in that. And you can see a piece of one that's not covered right there. That's where the foam is. So how did that foam get on the ground? Because these guys can't get up there. They can get up where the ladder is, but they can't just get up in here. That's where that foam is. That's right there. And you see it's broken, and you see it's molded to go over top of the upper legs and all that stuff, and it's laying, and there's another piece here, and then more broken pieces of equipment. The bolts are sheared right off. These guys did not have any tools to disconnect it. They only had the Boyd bolt connector, right? Yeah. And that's the amount of damage that's around this machine, and they haven't been anywhere near it. And of course, even when you take a look at these shots, all of the footprints and everything else around this machine, when you're looking at it, going through these photographs, and there's no way they could have been there.
Now, I think it was 3 photographs earlier. I think they were showing the platform out of which, or across which they would have crawled when they came out.
That one?
Yeah, that one.
No, that in Apollo 15, that particular piece of equipment was put up there with the handles on it for some of the experimental equipment. Those were extra trays. The upper mesa there on the thing looks very similar to it, where they come out, the upper mesa. But they had added these so that they work more like a skid board, that they could pull it out and drop it down. Yeah. And that's what they use the straps to help them pull it down. That should have been able to mount on the rover to drive the experimental equipment out to the site, because it's over 500 feet away, because they're not going to carry that. But you don't see that happening. These things are just left there. So obviously they didn't use it to get out there, to put them all out there.
Yeah, it's quite a long way out. They got taken the road.
I think the closest is 360 feet, but most of it's out around 500 feet. And it's always, for the experimental equipment, you just follow the angle of the shadows. That's where they go out to. And you see all of this stuff that's laying out here, right? I mean, how did it get there unless the wind blew it, right?
Oh, the wind blew it, yeah. Blows a lot of stuff around.
Yeah, this gets out there all over the place, right? Those are anomalies that you see just in the official record, and what's in the photographs is completely different. There's no way that there could be that much activity when the official record shows that they did a stand-up EVA when they landed. They didn't get out. First thing they did is unload the rover, which they claimed it only took about 20 minutes to get it off the machine and put all the equipment on it. That's what they claim. But the video they put out of for Apollo 15 taking the rover down is 1 hour and 20 minutes just to get it down. these little discrepancies. I mean, they could have uploaded a video of them unloading it in practice, and they probably recorded it many times while they were practicing. So the first time I mentioned it and said there's no video, all of a sudden they put up a video.
Oh,
Isn't that nice?